If you are being vegan or trying to be vegan, I highly advise always doing as much or more and more research upon your dietary or ethical preferences throughout your life. Don't just kind of go, I'm vegan, and then give up. There was recently a video by Humane Hancock where he was interviewing some people, and they were like, oh yes, I'm vegetarian. And then they're like, oh yeah, but what about all the milk being taken from the cows? They're like, what? I had no idea. And so some people had just chosen to be vegetarian. They thought that was ethical enough, stopped doing any research, never progressed on to being vegan, and in the end made themselves look like idiots, effectively. So my advice would always be to make sure you, if you're coming to veganism from a diet perspective, from maybe a health perspective, maybe an eating disorder perspective, research all the arguments for and against veganism. Make sure you're on top of the latest research, or at least the latest arguments with that. And that's where I think some of the people who do the kind of street debates, the change my mind, prove me wrong kind of debates are quite beneficial, because you get to hear the common reproduced arguments against your beliefs or your actions, and you hear some fantastic rebuttals to it. There's one which I haven't heard too much before, but I thought I'd just bring up here, which is more worrying because these are some ex-vegans here. So these people were supposedly vegan, and then they gave up being vegan, and what I find bizarre is that they're using the very weak anti-vegan arguments, which they must have heard when they were vegan, but they are now using it for their own purposes, being anti-vegan, or like just more carnivorous or omnivorous. And I find that bizarre. If you're going to be vegan and then become unvegan, to use the arguments which people would have made against you yourself, it just sounds bizarre. Anyway, so one of the arguments against, I don't know if it's even against veganism, but it's that a lot of the food that we feed to cattle isn't actually suitable for human consumption. And that sounds great. I don't know if that really is an argument against veganism, but let's hear. There was a chat here around about the 2 hours article with Bart K and some Sunfruit Dan, who looks like he's constantly smelling like somebody's done a fart in his room. And let's just hear what they have to say here, and I'll try and bring it to the relevant points.
I got on the vegan diet, so many people say about the environmental benefits, and I got programmed with so much of the dogma by these evangelistic, preaching, idealistic vegans out there. And actually, from what I've done, I can't repeat the information because I can't remember it all, but there's so much research and information to show a lot of what vegans are saying, but they're actually being better for the environment. A lot of it is absolute bogus, and so much of it's pseudoscience and misinformation, and then just lying through the teeth, trying to promote the vegan agenda like crazy. So yeah, it makes you feel better about being on this diet. A lot of what I've seen, especially if you have grass-fed cattle, it actually does help improve the environment with greenhouse gas emissions.
So grass-fed cattle improve the environment in terms of greenhouse emissions. Again, as somebody who was vegan, surely that argument must have come up in your conversations with people, and surely you must have done your research to figure out how that isn't true. And additionally, surely just in general common sense, certainly in the UK, certainly in America, grass-fed beef is sometimes double the price, twice as expensive as factory farmed beef. So to try and make the assumption that, well, if we had this magical, well, I'm not saying magical, but if we had this amazing super cow that had all this grass-fed and free roaming and hormone-free and all that stuff, everything would be great. We don't have that. We don't live in that situation. We live in a world where we're eating mountains of beef every single day, and the only way to get that is by mass producing it, like super farming, factory farming that, not this beautiful idyllic way of having a cow roaming around a field for 19 years of its life and then killing it whenever it gets to its ripe old age. No, we're killing it in its prime. But yeah, to say that environmentally is great. There was a fantastic fantastic. I implore everyone to make up an account on Channel 4 and watch Apocalypse Cow, How Meat Killed the Planet. This guy, George Monbiot, he's got a fantastic rebuttal against this and some amazing visual displays of how much grass-fed beef and lamb and sheep and all that stuff, how much land that they require compared to even factory farming. So, and additionally, the amount of land that is required, the amount of potentially foresting that's needed, or like deforesting that's needed to make sure there's enough land for these animals, is actually really bad for the planet. so yeah, this magic way of grass-fed, I'm amazed they come up with this. But let's hear. I'll just let this play for a little bit longer.
So yeah, and if you look at a combine harvester that is like going through these monocrops, what goes all behind them? All of these birds and everything, they're eating all the dead animals that have gone through it. So the amount of animals that are being killed through that means
speciesist, you're saying. So
all these birds are eating the dead animals, or maybe they're going down to get all the bits in corn. The giant combine harvester that goes through the ground. And additionally, the combine harvester doesn't go all the way down to the ground. It like cuts about 5 inches away from the ground because it doesn't need all that extra stalk at the bottom. So little mice can happily be at the bottom of that. But normally the sound of them are terrifying and animals quickly fly away. They're not going wow, Humphrey Dan, didn't think about that one very much. You know, like, anytime I've even gone near a field or a forest, even if I tiptoe around, animals, you know what they do? Disappear. I'm not as big and as scary as a giant combine harvester, but yet I'm barely able to see any animals in any fields that I go into. And the sound and noise and vibration and threateningness of a giant combine harvester, pretty sure any smart animal is going to get away from that quite easily. They're not that fast, the combine harvesters, and they don't go right down to the ground. They're not ploughing up the ground and taking up the mice bunny holes, and all the birds flying behind aren't just going and eating this like piles, hundreds of dead animals. It's just like, surely these were the arguments that you got before. Anyway. Okay, so anyway, let's listen to the bit from Apocalypse Cow. I'll probably get busted for copyright, so I'm going to squint this at a bit of an angle. But George here has a fantastic point of just kind of saying, great, we've eradicated all this land from forests, from bushes, from kind of wild land, turned it into pasture land. Granted, what grows on pasture land is just grass, which is inedible for humans. So to say that, oh, what cows eat is inedible, was like, yeah, because we've made sure that that land is inedible for them. Additionally, what was the next bit? That when you've got all this land, sometimes it's still not enough to feed your cows, and you have to then supplement your cows with food from abroad. So let's just have let's see how far I can get. So here he is on a farm with a farmer, very much vegan versus farmer.
When you're looking at your cows like this, what do you feel, Abby?
They are my father, they're my grandfather, they're brilliant. It makes me really proud. Sometimes you forget that you're producing food.
I'm seeing these as great big carbon-releasing machines who are taking up a load of land which could otherwise be used for an amazing restoration of wildlife, for sucking carbon out of the air. Just seems to me like an extravagance that we can't afford anymore.
Well, I'm a food industry. I'm very important for you. I'm important for you 3 times a day to make sure that you survive.
Except I don't eat any of your products.
Shame on you.
I don't blame any farmer for being wary of a vegan on a mission. My biggest problem with livestock farming is how inefficient it is. Remember those 23 million sheep that occupy so much of the UK? Well, they provide just over 1% of our food in terms of calories. We keep being told we should switch to free-range meat, as it's meant to be more environmentally friendly. But the surprising truth is that it causes more damage to the living world than indoor livestock farming, because it uses much more land, mostly for pasture. And even that pasture may not be enough to support the animals. Abby's dairy cattle eat more grass and cereals than she can grow, so she has to supplement their diet with imports.
So how much of this do you buy in every month, Abby?
A ton a month
Ton a month.
of this.
Yeah.
So it's calf feed and the dry
That's the
cow
calf
feed.
feed, right. So what's that feed got in it then?
A little bit of soya in there, a little bit of palm kernel. The bulk is usually either wheat or barley.
Wheat or barley, you're thinking, that's not inedible to humans. We can happily have our wheat, we can happily have our barley. That's just kind of what's in bread and in beer. Fantastic. A lot of the barley may be the stuff that's not used in the brewing process. It might be the stuff that's left over, which is fair enough.
Now, when I hear palm kernel being in that feed,
Yeah.
I mean, that's oil palm, isn't it? That
Palm
chills me because, you know, this is possibly the most destructive crop on earth. The rainforests are being felled for it. And to sort of think that our milk is partly dependent on that business is not a happy thought.
86% of the feed products in that ton of food is from food that cannot go into the human chain.
It's true that this animal feed isn't fit to be eaten by humans,
Listen,
but it wouldn't have to be grown at all if it were not for animal farming. 1/3 of the world's crops are being grown to feed to livestock.
I'm not going to play any more there because he gets into more details, and I think it's more valuable for you to go and watch this for yourselves. But he comes up with some fantastic arguments for and against, and basic arguments against but it's not food that humans can eat. Let's hear. I'll just see if these guys have anything more interesting to say.
That about 80 to 90% of the foods that animals eat in animal agriculture is actually not edible by humans. It's actually a byproduct of the. That's something that's been talked about a lot recently. They're talking about the foods that is actually, busted up, given to these cows for feed. It's not even edible by humans. It's a lot of either the leftover food, it's gone bad, or it's actually just like the husks of the corn, stuff like that, things that humans wouldn't be able to consume. Very fibrous pieces of the food.
Yeah, I saw that recently. They were showing 80% the husk of the corn. They don't actually give them the edible part of the corn.
But 80% of the world's grain is fed to livestock.
No, that's not true, Harley. That's nonsense.
What's the percent, Bart? What's the percent? That's
It's
the UN.
It's more like 30 to 40% in terms of the actual scientific empirical data that I...
So yeah, it's an interesting argument, but it seems like if we didn't have all these cattle, all this other stuff could, one, not be transported halfway across the world to feed animals which are meant to be just grazing on the fields. So yeah, it does seem like the argument that going, just grass-fed cows are good for the environment. Yeah, but a lot of grass-fed cows can't be fully fed by just being grass-fed. They have to have food imported in this perfect example here. And being grass-fed, they require the most amount of land. And that amount of land requires to be deforested, which ends up being less carbon sequestering. No, that's not the right way to say that. It sequesters less carbon from the atmosphere. So it may not be directly from the cows themselves, but the result from changing the purpose of the land to being from wild land to pastured land for cows has a knock-on effect or a synergistic effect in the negative way of being negatively good for the environment. So yeah, just everyone, even if you're not vegan, but you're interested in it, do research on it. Even if you're just into veganism for dietary reasons or health reasons, if you slowly get into the ethical side of it or the environmental side of it, there's a lot of research to be done, especially with the arguments and the counter arguments going on here. But one of the main arguments that they said is that, all the grass-fed beef is good for the environment and they just get fed food which humans can't eat. The argument is we wouldn't have to make that food that humans can't eat if we didn't have all these cows, and all these cows that are grass-fed require so much more land, which is bad for the environment. So there's the counter-argument. So check that out. The main guy there was George Monbiot. Monbiot. I don't know how to pronounce his name, but he has some pretty good arguments. And on that Channel 4 in the UK, he had a great kind of visual demonstration of the percentage of land used for animals, cities, and wildland, and how much we've potentially destroyed our environment. Check out. Bye bye.